Remember when one income was enough? Not in some distant past. Just a generation ago, an average Australian family of four could thrive on a single paycheck, a modest home, good public schools, an annual holiday, and a bit tucked away for retirement. Nothing fancy, just a decent life. Fast forward to today, and that same lifestyle feels out of reach. What used to be standard now looks like luxury. Housing, groceries, healthcare, education, even getting around, have all edged beyond the budget of the average worker. This isn't just about rising costs. It's about what happens when the essentials of life, things every Australian should have, start slipping through our fingers. So how did we get here? Let's break it down. 1. Housing. Australia was once a home ownership dream. In 1994, about 71% of Australians owned their own home. Fast forward to today, and that number has fallen to just under 66%. And it's worse for young people. For those aged 25 to 34, home ownership has dropped from 51% in 1994 to 37% in 2021. It's not that young people stopped wanting homes. They were simply priced out. According to CoreLogic, the median house price in Sydney hit $1.1 million in 2024. In Melbourne, it's around $860,000. Want to live in a regional town to save money? Not so fast. The pandemic-era exodus from the cities drove up regional property values, too. In some areas, prices rose by over 40% in just 2 years. Renters haven't been spared either. Across Australia, the median weekly rent hit $627 in 2024. In Brisbane, rent surged over 30% in 2 years. Vacancy rates in major cities? Below 1%. People are sleeping in cars, tents, couch surfing. Australia now has over 122,000 homeless people, according to the last census, and many of them are employed. The term working homeless is no longer rare, it's reality. Once upon a time, shelter was a right. Now it's a competitive sport. 2. Food. Let's talk groceries. Because for many Australians, the supermarket has become ground zero in the cost of living crisis. Back in the 1990s, the average household spent around $100 a week on groceries. Adjusted for inflation, that should be roughly $200 today. And yet families, especially households with children, are now averaging between $254 and $350 a week, depending on location and dietary needs. That's not just inflation at play, that's real price pressure hitting the checkout. For single-parent households or those on fixed incomes, the difference isn't just a few dollars. It's the gap between staying afloat and falling behind. And when you add in stagnant wages, rising housing costs, and utility bills climbing at the same time, groceries become just one more pressure point in a system that's squeezing families from every direction. So what's driving the gap? A big part of the problem lies in Australia's grocery duopoly, Coles and Woolworths, which together control over 65% of the market. Their profits are soaring, yet shoppers are staring down $4 cucumbers and $8.50 for a simple 3-pack of capsicum. In 2023, the Consumer Price Index reported an 8% rise in food and non-alcoholic beverage prices, with staples like bread, dairy, and meat seeing double-digit hikes. The result? The average grocery run now feels like a budgeting boot camp. Families are switching to frozen veggies, cutting back on protein, and eliminating non-essentials. Even snacks are starting to look like luxuries. Foodbank Australia saw a 20% increase in demand in 2024, with a growing number of clients being dual-income households. Food insecurity is no longer fringe. It's the new normal. 3. Healthcare. Universal in theory, selective in practice. Australia has long taken pride in Medicare, a system often held up as one of the better public healthcare models in the world. But while the foundations still stand, the cracks are widening. Bulk billing, once the heart of Medicare's promise of universal access, is steadily vanishing. In 2023, just 42% of GPs nationwide offered bulk billing, down from 66% 5 years earlier. In major cities like Sydney and Melbourne, the figures are even lower, forcing patients to pay out of pocket more often than not. Today, a standard GP visit typically costs between $70 and $95, with Medicare reimbursing only $41.40. That leaves a gap fee of up to $50 just to speak to a doctor. For specialists, it's worse. Appointments can cost hundreds, and delays in the public system can stretch for months. And when it comes to mental health, the reality is stark. Psychologists charge between $150 and $250 per session, and Medicare only covers 10 sessions per year. The result? Australians are delaying treatment, skipping checkups, and hoping symptoms go away on their own. Meanwhile, private health insurance, once optional, is now seen as essential, yet unaffordable. Premiums rose 3.5% in 2024, with average family coverage now exceeding $500 per month. What was once a safety net is quickly becoming a sieve. 4. Education. Public education in Australia is, at least on paper, free. But for most families, that idea doesn't hold up in practice. In reality, parents are expected to pay hundreds, sometimes thousands, each year in so-called voluntary contributions, plus technology levies, school excursions, uniforms, and endless lists of stationery and supplies. A 2024 report from the Smith family found that the average annual cost of sending a child to a public school is around $3,000. Multiply that by 2 or 3 kids, and you're looking at a serious financial strain, especially for low to middle income households. Thinking of switching to private school? That's an even steeper hill. The median tuition for a high school student sits around $11,000 per year, but many of Sydney and Melbourne's elite private schools charge upwards of $35,000 annually before you even consider textbooks, uniforms, or extracurricular fees. Then, there's tertiary education. Students graduating in 2024 carried an average HECS help debt of over $25,000. For fields like law or medicine, that number easily jumps to $70,000 or more. And thanks to indexation, 7.1% in 2023 alone, this debt keeps growing, even while wages stagnate. So while public education may be free in name, it's increasingly clear that Australian families are paying more than ever for the privilege of learning. 5. Transport. Car ownership used to be simple. Buy a used car, get it insured, and drive to work. Easy. But those days are fading fast. Now, a reliable second-hand car comes with a hefty price tag. Supply chain disruptions pushed prices up by 30% between 2020 and 2022. And those high costs have stuck around. Even a 10-year-old Toyota Corolla sells for over $15,000 these days, far from cheap. Then there's petrol. As of early 2025, prices hover around $2.10 per liter in most capital cities. Public transport might seem like a bargain, but only if you live in a city. In Melbourne, a monthly Myki pass costs about $167. Sydney's Opal weekly cap is around $50, which stacks up quickly. For regional Australians where buses might run only twice a day, a car isn't a luxury, it's a necessity. And let's not forget toll roads. Sydney holds the dubious title of the most tolled city in the world. Commuters routinely pay $80 to $100 per week just to get to work, amounting to over $4,000 annually for the privilege of driving on public roads. When transport costs start eating up a third of your income, simply getting to work feels less like a right and more like a luxury. 6. Childcare. In today's economy, where it's often necessary for both parents to work, childcare isn't just a convenience, it's essential. But in Australia, it's also among the most expensive in the developed world. The average cost of long day care ranges from $130 to $160 per day per child. For a full-time working parent, that can add up to more than $3,000 a month. The government does offer childcare subsidies to ease the burden. But even with this support, many families still find themselves paying $500 to $1,000 out of pocket every month. And if your household earns just a little too much, those subsidies disappear quickly, leaving a steep bill behind. The consequence: many parents, particularly mothers, are forced to make heartbreaking choices. They stay home, not out of desire, but because working simply doesn't make financial sense when childcare costs eat up the majority of their paycheck. When going to work actually costs you money, it's clear that something is seriously wrong with the system. 7. Energy and utilities. Electricity bills used to be straightforward and predictable. You'd pay around $100 a quarter, shrug it off, and get on with your life. Not anymore. Today, the average household is paying between $400 and $600 a quarter, sometimes even more. Energy prices skyrocketed in 2023 and 2024, driven by a perfect storm of global supply disruptions and domestic infrastructure challenges. But it's not just electricity. Gas bills, water rates, and council charges are all on the rise. By 2024, The average household utility bill topped $3,500 a year. Families are adapting, turning off heaters in the cold months, opting for fans over air conditioning in summer, timing showers precisely, and air-drying clothes instead of using dryers. This isn't about being eco-friendly, it's about survival. When managing energy use becomes a strategic budgeting exercise instead of a basic necessity, something fundamental has shifted. 8. Leisure. Going out for dinner used to be a simple pleasure, a treat, a break from cooking at home. Now, it feels like a luxury reserved for special occasions. A basic meal for two at a mid-range restaurant will set you back $80 to $100. Add a couple of drinks, and you're easily pushing $150. Even takeout, your classic Friday night fish and chips, is creeping toward $50 for a family. Entertainment costs are climbing too. Cinema tickets are over $20 each, gym memberships average around $80 a month, and a weekend getaway can cost several $100s at minimum. As these prices rise, many Australians are simply opting to stay home more often. But here's the catch. Life can't just be about getting through the day. When even the things that bring joy, going out with friends, catching a movie, a simple night off, come with a hefty price tag, it starts to wear people down. This creeping cost on leisure isn't just a financial issue. It's a quiet threat to our well-being and community spirit. How did we get to a point where the basics, housing, food, health, education, have become financial minefields? Some point to wage stagnation. Over the last decade, real wages have barely moved. In fact, in many sectors, they've gone backward when adjusted for inflation. Meanwhile, corporate profits are booming. The Big Four banks posted combined profits of over $32 billion in 2024. Others point to government policy, or the lack thereof. Housing policies that favor investors. A tax system that rewards speculation. Underinvestment in public infrastructure. Weak regulation of monopolies. Some say it's global. Inflation, supply chain issues, geopolitical instability. And they're right. But the pain is being felt locally, and disproportionately by those with the least. What makes a country livable isn't GDP or stock markets. It's whether ordinary people can afford ordinary things. Australia still has much going for it. Clean air, stunning beaches, relative safety, a decent healthcare framework. But when basics become luxuries, when survival becomes a daily spreadsheet, and when a dignified life becomes an uphill climb, something has gone wrong. We shouldn't accept a society where the essentials are slipping away from the very people who keep it running. Teachers, nurses, retail workers, cleaners, truck drivers, tradies. These are the people who built this country. If they can't afford to live here anymore, who is Australia really for? It's time we had a serious conversation, not just about inflation or interest rates, but about values. What kind of country do we want to be? Because if we're not careful, we'll wake up one day and realize the Australia we once took for granted, the fair go, the modest home, the backyard barbecue, the freedom to live a decent life, was quietly priced out of existence. And the basics? They'll be nothing but a memory. If this video resonated with you, consider subscribing. Share your story in the comments, and let's keep the conversation going.